I will come back to you.
I struggle because we just spent all of this time talking about, making things gender neutral, but this is targeted at girls. So is it gender neutral, or are we acknowledging that boys and girls are different? Girls have cleavage, boys don't. And I gotta tell you, a story from 13 years ago, while it's poignant, that to me points to a professional development piece that has to do with how our administrators are trained to talk and work with kids. And I go to, again, a Principal Morris type of graduation speech where it is clear, it's crystal clear with every word he delivered how much he cares for his students, regardless of their struggles, regardless of their backgrounds, regardless of how they arrive in his school. And it's clear to me his staff does too. So when I hear, a particular, an anecdotal story of a particular staff member talked poorly to a child about what they were wearing, then that's a professional development piece for that teacher, that administrator, that SRO. You don't change your language and your dress code to prevent the opportunity of us potentially shaming a girl through words in our dress code that talk about her body parts that we want to have covered. And I give you a relevant example that happened today. Today I walked into a high school and I arrived at the school as a young lady was being dropped off by what looked like her father, wearing nothing other than what I could describe as Daisy Duke shorts, an adorable shirt that if you want to be at a beach or something is perfectly appropriate, but the shirt came down to here and it came up to here and her belly wasn't covered and she was walking into school. And I have to tell you, boys are visual beings, and it is not fair to have a young lady walking the schools of a high school dressed with, shorts up to here, tops down to there, and tops up to here. And when do we? What is too much of an expanse of skin to show? Are there rulers? I mean, the nebulous nature of you can't show too much skin. Well, what is too much? And then is an administrator going to get in trouble for one type of clothing? Cover up your, cleavage down to there that's a pretty clear, you can understand that. And it doesn't have to be a tube top or a halter top or something backless to be cut down way too far to be not appropriate for an educational setting. And I'm sorry to say that there are times where girls are making inappropriate choices for an educational environment. There are some times that there are boys, but it's just not as often. So disproportionately, it's going to be winding up young ladies needing to have a discussion about what's appropriate. If they're wearing a skirt that's extraordinarily short, that's not something that a boy was going to be wearing that's going to cause him trouble. It's a different situation. And if our administrators, for some reason, are not having appropriate conversations with young people, and that would include publicly, you don't need to call a child out publicly. You can say, hey, can I talk to you for a second? And they can be, taken aside, and that can be a learning moment. But I'm very concerned with where we're headed, that we're calling out individual stories. I haven't had it. I understand that you said that you worked with Ms. Johnson, but I haven't had the principals weigh in on this. I haven't had teachers weigh on this. Are we now going to saddle the teachers and administrators and principals in our buildings with a new nuance of what it means to be appropriately dressed? We seem to be fighting a tide here of either it's Me Too and we're trying to prevent sexual harassment, and we know that is a strengthening of our language and our professional development that we need to do across the board in our athletic communities, in our teaching community, in our administrative community. and be a leader in that regard, but then we can't in the same breath say, oh, by the way, you know, you have to cover your private parts. Well, you can cover your private parts with a bikini. I mean, so that's not appropriate for an educational setting either. So I think this muddies the water further, and I think that if we want to have this kind of conversation, it needs to be tied in with more professional development by the system for the people running our schools, and we need to have a more comprehensive conversation. I'd like to meet with particularly the high school principals and have a conversation with them about what they encounter and what their concerns are, because actually what I hear from them is they're happy enforcing the dress policy because it makes things easier at school when people understand what the lanes are. And I think this muddies the water a lot.
Ms. Derenak,